The paper grocery bags dug into the creases of my fingers as I stepped through the front door. I'd just worked a 10-hour shift at the firm, skipped lunch, and still made the stop for almond milk olive oil and those exact brand of crackers Mom insisted on. The hallway smelled like floor cleaner and fried onions. My shoes squeaked against the tile. No one looked up. I placed the bags on the counter, exhaling. My wrists ached from behind me. Dad's voice cut the air. "You get my message?" I turned halfway about what he moved into the kitchen, arms crossed, mouth tight. "Your mother and I have been talking. If you won't step up and contribute more, maybe you don't belong here at all." For a moment, I thought I misheard. Step up. You live on your own, have a good job, but this household is drowning. Your brother's still figuring things out. I'm retired. Your mom has her health issues. I've been paying the mortgage, I said, quiet. Utilities, groceries, almost everything. Ethan called from the living room, not even bothering to look away from the TV. She acts like she's doing us a favor or something. My hands clenched around the edge of the bag. Crackers shifted, nearly tore the bottom open. I glanced down at the receipt still folded in my pocket. $16.48. All for them. I'm not acting, I said. My voice didn't rise. I've actually been doing. Dad's jaw tensed. Don't get dramatic. Mom appeared at the doorway, arms crossed like a verdict. We just want everyone to do their part. I've done more than my part. Then why does it still feel like you're holding back? Something in my chest turned to stone. I let go of the bag. It slumped onto the counter with a quiet thud. I just got off work, I said. But fine. You want more, I'll give you something. They watched me like I might scream, might cry. I didn't either. I walked to the door, pulled it open, and before stepping out, I said softly, "Then this house no longer has a daughter named Avery. I was raised to believe that being dependable was the same as being loved. If they could count on me, I mattered. If I came through, I belonged." It started small. I was 16 the first time I covered a utility bill. Mom had accidentally overdrawn the account again. I used part of my paycheck from the grocery store to keep the lights on. She kissed my forehead and said, "You're such a good girl. You'll always take care of us." That sentence became prophecy. By 25, I was covering the Wi-Fi, water, and most of the groceries without being asked. By 28, I was forwarding money for their car insurance, then quietly paying off Ethan's overdraft fees. He got a new phone every Christmas. I hadn't upgraded mine in 4 years. When Dad's prescriptions weren't covered one month, I drove across town on a lunch break to pick them up. No one reimbursed me. No one offered. Family supports each other, Mom would say, then send a list of errands. I never asked for much. I wasn't the type to need gifts or praise. I just wanted to be seen, to be acknowledged as more than the one holding it all up. But it wasn't until I started keeping track that I realized how far things had gone. One night, a week before tax season, I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet. I listed every transaction from the past 8 months. Utilities, groceries, car repairs, credit card minimums, co-signed loans, even Ethan's therapy bills, which I hadn't known I was still paying. Each line had a date, a purpose, and a total. The number at the bottom was $18,426.17. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I expected them to pay it back, but because I needed to see it. Needed to confront the truth in black and white. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as coverage. I printed the sheet, taped it above my desk in my one-bedroom apartment, and didn't tell anyone. It wasn't for them. It was for me, a quiet reminder that I was not overreacting, that it wasn't just a few things here and there, that I was not wrong to feel drained. That night, I made myself tea and looked around the room. The place was quiet, a little too quiet, but I knew I had to get used to it because silence, unlike obligation, doesn't demand repayment. The lease was short-term. The carpet was worn and the walls were a shade of beige that no one could name, but the place was mine. I moved in with 2 suitcases, a coffee maker, and a bookshelf that took an hour to assemble by myself. No one offered to help, and for the first time, I didn't feel hurt by that. The absence felt like space to breathe space to exist. The texts came every other day. Mom's were long and winding, laced with guilt. Dad's were abrupt. Call your mother. Have you checked the mail? Ethan only texted when something broke, usually followed by a Venmo request. I didn't block any of them. I just turned off notifications. Let the silence stretch between us like a new language I was learning. One where I didn't have to translate exhaustion into kindness. My bank account pinged less now. No transfers, no rush deposits to cover overdrafts I didn't cause. I started tracking my own spending again. Small things like herbal tea, a new shower curtain, groceries that didn't include anyone else's preferences. At night, I made myself dinner. Real meals, nothing frozen, nothing rushed. I played soft music while I cooked. I didn't check my phone. I didn't have to wonder what would be waiting on the screen. Some nights, I'd lie in bed just listening to the hum of the ceiling fan. My body, for the first time in years, didn't feel like it was bracing for something. No one would knock. No one would barge in. No one needed anything. I started sleeping through the night, full, uninterrupted hours. 8 hours turned into 9 on weekends. There was no applause, no audience, just the quiet sound of a life being rebuilt one breath at a time. I kept the spreadsheet on my desk, but I didn't open it much. I didn't need to see the numbers anymore to remember the truth. The distance had done what confrontation couldn't. It gave me room to stop performing. One Friday morning, I checked the weather and decided to walk to work. The breeze felt honest. It didn't owe me anything, didn't demand gratitude or submission. And when my phone buzzed again, another message from home, I didn't flinch. I just slipped it back into my bag and kept walking. It had been 3 weeks since I walked away. 3 weeks of quiet dinners, 8-hour sleeps, and checking my own account balance without flinching. Then, on a Wednesday morning, just as I stepped into my office building, my phone buzzed with a message from Dad. Why didn't the card go through no greeting? No question mark, just those 7 words, like I had missed a shift at a job I never applied for. I didn't reply. I didn't even stop walking. I placed my phone face down on my desk and poured coffee like it was any other morning. By noon, Ethan was calling. When I didn't answer, he tried again and again. On the 4th attempt, I picked up. I figured I owed myself the right to hear how far they'd stretch. You knew we needed that money, he snapped. Before I could say a word, I said nothing. You think you can just stop helping and nothing happens? You think you're better than us because you've got some little apartment and a spreadsheet. Still, I said nothing. He hung up with a frustrated scoff. Not even a goodbye. That night, I opened my laptop and logged into the bank's public property portal. I typed in the address of the house I grew up in. Pre-foreclosure. Final notice issued. My heart didn't drop. My hands didn't shake. I just stared at the screen, not surprised, just cold. I'd been sending $1,300 a month for nearly a year. Sometimes more. I'd never seen the actual mortgage statement. They never offered to show it. I thought I was helping. I thought I was preventing collapse. But now I saw it clearly. The money didn't go to the bank. It went elsewhere. I closed the tab. I didn't need details. The truth was enough. They hadn't needed a daughter. They'd needed a system. And that system just broke. I poured myself a glass of water and sat on the floor beside my little table. No music, no noise. They would scramble now, blame me, guilt me, twist the silence into selfishness. But I wasn't part of the structure anymore. I wasn't the net catching their falls. I had simply stepped aside and watched gravity do its work. The phone lit up again, this time Mom's name. I let it ring untouched until it faded away. I hadn't planned to call. I'd rehearsed silence, wore it like armor, but something about seeing that final foreclosure notice pushed me into motion, not out of rage, out of finality. I waited until Sunday afternoon. They were always home then. Dad watching the game, Mom folding laundry with the TV on, Ethan pretending to look for jobs. I dialed the house phone. It rang twice. Hello, Mom's voice came, sweet, stretched thin. Avery put me on speaker, I said. A pause, then the soft beep of the speakerphone. In the background, I heard the familiar creak of the kitchen chair, a soda can, opening the rustle of papers. I'm here, Dad said. Same, Ethan muttered. I inhaled once, steady. Where did the money go? Silence. What Mom asked as if she hadn't heard. I sent over $1,300 every month for nearly a year. I checked the mortgage. It's in foreclosure, so I'm asking, where did the money go? Mom cleared her throat. Your father had dental work, and then the water heater broke. Ethan's car needed repairs and the cost of groceries. It's been overwhelming. Ethan cut in. You act like we went on vacation. Stuff came up. We were going to sort it. Dad added, It's not like we meant to deceive you. Things just got ahead of us. I didn't yell. I didn't even sigh. You never showed me a bill, never asked if I could afford it. Never offered repayment. You just assumed I would cover it quietly. Avery Mom started. We're family. You shouldn't need a contract. I nodded to myself. That's the thing. I didn't have a contract. I didn't have my name on the deed. I didn't even have a place at the table unless I brought something to it. No one spoke. I've read the emails. I've heard the voicemails. You've called me cold, selfish, dramatic, but I'm none of those things. I was your daughter. You turned me into your donor. A long breath on the other end. Then Dad's voice low and brittle. You don't understand. Without you, we're losing everything. I looked out the window at the modest tree swaying in front of my apartment. No, I said quietly. You lost everything the moment you started seeing me as a balance sheet. I pressed end. Not out of hatred. Not out of anger, just completion, the kind that doesn't need applause or permission. I placed the phone face down on the table and reached for the envelope I hadn't opened yet, the one with my name and their return address. The envelope was thinner than I expected. Inside was a final notice, words like, Delinquent Default Eviction Proceedings, printed in bold. My name was nowhere on the deed, but still the letter had found its way to me. Like they had wanted me to see it, like they needed me to feel one last tremor of guilt. I folded it once, then again, and tore it in half, not out of rage. There was no heat left, just a quiet understanding that this wasn't mine to carry. It never had been. I opened our old group chat. The thread stretched back years. Photos of birthday cakes I paid for, receipts from grocery trips, passive-aggressive emojis, dry requests. I scrolled until my thumb hurt. Then I stopped. One line. I'm not your backup plan anymore. Goodbye. I sent it. I left the group. Then I blocked them all. Mom, Dad, Ethan. The phone went still. Not silent. Stillness is different. Silence waits. Stillness accepts. I closed the banking app I'd left open and opened another one just for me. I'd created it a few months back, unsure if I'd ever use it. It had no linked pay, no transfers out, just deposits, small ones, until today. I went to the corner boutique I always passed on the way to work, the kind of place I used to think was too indulgent. Inside, I tried on a pair of soft leather shoes. They fit. I paid in full. No discounts, no guilt. When I walked out, I didn't feel like someone escaping anything. I felt like someone returning to themselves. Later that evening, I made dinner just for one. I poured a glass of wine and lit a candle I'd been saving since last Christmas. The flame flickered steadily as if it knew something final had settled. The spreadsheet still hung above my desk, but I no longer needed it to remind me. The boundary wasn't in the numbers. It was in the breath I now took without flinching. They would call it betrayal, abandonment, selfishness. Let them. I had given my time, my earnings, my energy until I was emptied. Now I had given one last thing a clean goodbye, and the space it left behind was exactly the size of peace. As I curled up on the couch with the new shoes beside the door, I opened a new tab on my laptop, one I hadn't dared open in years, and started searching for flights. The dining table was small, but it held more than enough. A slow cooker of lentils, someone's famous spinach dip slices of cornbread still warm in the foil. Laughter drifted in from the kitchen as Emma and Lucas argued over who made the best chili. My contribution sat modestly in the center lemon bars made from scratch. I hadn't hosted anything in years, not because I couldn't, but because it never occurred to me that people might show up without expecting anything more than a seat and a story. We sat cross-legged on the floor plates, balanced on newspaper napkins, folded just enough to look thoughtful. It was warm, not just the apartment, the feeling unforced simple. At one point, someone asked why I never talked about my family. It was casual, not prying, just curiosity. I paused a beat, then smiled. Some stories are better closed, I said. No one pushed. They just nodded and kept eating. Later that night, after the dishes were rinsed and the laughter had faded into the quiet hum of my apartment, I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window. The rosemary in the box beside me was finally sprouting. The leaves were still small, but they smelled strong when crushed between my fingers. I had started planting things in spring, not just herbs habits. On Saturdays, I went to the farmer's market. On Wednesdays, I took a yoga class. Some mornings, I walked before work without checking my phone. And in the quiet moments between everything, I wrote lists, books I wanted to read, places I wanted to go. Colorado was at the top. I didn't know anyone there. That was the point. It felt like a place where silence would be scenic, not loaded. The money I once wired to save someone else's home was now quietly building a path towards something entirely mine. A solo trip, a new coat, a better mattress, things that didn't require justification. I used to think home meant shared blood, shared walls, shared obligations. Now I knew better. Home was where I could breathe. It was in the rosemary on my windowsill, in the text from Emma asking for my lemon bar recipe, in the quiet hum of a ceiling fan that didn't come with tension or expectation. It was in the stillness after people leave and nothing feels broken. That night, I folded a clean sheet of paper and wrote the words "Packing List Colorado" at the top. Natalie learns a profound lesson about self-worth and the importance of setting boundaries in relationships, even with family. Initially, she equates being dependable with being loved, sacrificing her time, money, and energy to support her parents and brother, believing it secures her place in their lives. She covers bills, groceries, and even her brother's overdraft fees, totaling over $18,000 without recognition or reciprocity. This relentless giving leaves her, drained her identity, reduced to a financial resource rather than a cherished daughter. The turning point comes when she confronts the reality of her family's reliance on her, discovering their misuse of her contributions as their home faces foreclosure. This betrayal prompts her to step back, reclaiming her autonomy by moving into her own apartment and cutting financial ties. Through silence and distance, she finds peace, realizing that love should not demand self-erasure. Natalie's journey teaches her that true belonging comes from self-respect, not obligation. She begins to prioritize her own needs, buying new shoes, cooking for herself, planning a solo trip to Colorado, embracing a life where her value isn't tied to what she provides others. The stillness she cultivates, distinct from the expectant silence of her family's demands, becomes a space for healing and self-discovery. By hosting friends who value her presence without expectations, she redefines home as a place of mutual respect and personal freedom. Natalie's lesson is that setting boundaries, though painful, is essential to preserving one's identity and building a life rooted in self-worth, not sacrifice. Her story underscores that love, familial or otherwise, should uplift, not deplete, and that sometimes walking away is the ultimate act of self-preservation.
The auditorium at Stanford Business School was packed with proud families, their faces beaming as they watched their children receive MBA degrees that represented 2 years of intensive study and six-figure investments in education. I sat in the third row, adjusting my cap and gown, glancing occasionally at the section where families gathered to take photos and celebrate achievements. My section remained conspicuously empty. The seats I'd reserved for my parents and siblings sat vacant, a physical reminder that my family had chosen not to attend what they considered a meaningless ceremony for a degree they thought would never amount to anything practical. Mom had been blunt when I'd sent the invitation 3 weeks earlier. We're too busy with real priorities to sit through another one of your academic fantasies. Dad had been even more direct. An MBA from Stanford? That's just more debt for a piece of paper that won't help you get a real job. Your brother Daniel is expanding his auto repair business, and your sister Lisa just got promoted to regional sales manager. They're building actual careers while you're still playing student. My family had always measured success in traditional, tangible terms. Daniel owned 3 auto repair shops across the county and employed 12 mechanics. Lisa had worked her way up from entry-level sales to regional management at a pharmaceutical company, overseeing a team of 40 representatives. They bought houses, made car payments, sent their kids to good schools, and contributed to retirement accounts. They understood success they could see and touch. What they couldn't understand was why their youngest daughter had spent the past 6 years pursuing impractical degrees while running what they assumed was a failing tech startup from her tiny apartment. They saw the long hours, the modest lifestyle, the constant focus on computers and code, and concluded that I was wasting my potential on unrealistic dreams. Emma Chin, the dean announced, and I walked across the stage alone. I accepted my diploma with a smile, shook hands with the faculty, and posed for the official photographer. Around me, other graduates were immediately surrounded by cheering families, but I returned to my seat solo and watched the rest of the ceremony with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had accomplished something meaningful, even if nobody I cared about was there to witness it. After the ceremony, I fielded congratulatory calls from classmates' families who had seen me walk alone and wanted to make sure I felt celebrated. Their kindness was touching, but it also highlighted the absence I was trying not to think about. That evening, I returned to my small apartment in Palo Alto, the same modest space my family assumed was evidence of my continued financial struggles. The rent was reasonable by Silicon Valley standards, the furniture was basic, and my car was a 3-year-old Honda Civic that I'd bought used. To anyone looking from the outside, I appeared to be another struggling entrepreneur living paycheck to paycheck while chasing an impossible dream. The reality was considerably different. Hidden behind the bedroom's false wall was a sophisticated command center equipped with multiple monitors, high-end servers, and communication systems that connected me to data centers across 3 continents. This was the real headquarters of Quantum Solutions, the artificial intelligence company I'd founded during my sophomore year at Stanford and had been building quietly for the past 4 years. What my family saw as a failing tech startup was actually a revolutionary AI platform that had attracted partnerships with major corporations, government agencies, and research institutions around the world. We developed machine learning algorithms that could process and analyze data at speeds that were transforming entire industries, from financial modeling to medical research to predictive logistics. I pulled up the company's dashboard on my secure system. Current valuation, $4.2 billion. Active contracts, $847 million. Employees, 312 across 7 countries. Patents filed, 127. Patents approved, 89. Quantum Solutions had achieved in 4 years what most tech companies spent decades trying to build. We weren't just profitable. We were reshaping how artificial intelligence integrated with human decision-making across multiple sectors. But maintaining anonymity had been crucial for both security and strategic reasons. The AI space was intensely competitive, with major corporations and foreign governments constantly attempting to acquire or steal breakthrough technologies. By operating under the radar, using shell companies and proxy agreements, we'd been able to develop our platform without attracting the kind of attention that could compromise our research or limit our flexibility. My family's assumption that I was failing had actually provided perfect cover for building something extraordinary. My phone buzzed with a text from my CTO, David Kim. Forbes photographer wants to schedule the cover shoot for next week. Are you ready for this level of visibility? The Forbes 30 Under 30 feature had been unavoidable. Our company's success had reached a point where continued anonymity was becoming impossible, and several business publications had been investigating the mysterious AI startup that was quietly disrupting multiple industries. Rather than let others control the narrative, we decided to reveal my identity and Quantum Solutions' achievements on our own terms. Schedule it for Tuesday afternoon, I replied. And David, make sure the article emphasizes our team's collaborative achievements, not just individual recognition. Already handled. The piece focuses on how Quantum Solutions is democratizing AI technology while maintaining ethical development standards. The next morning I received my weekly call from Lisa. She'd made it a habit to check in every Sunday, ostensibly to see how I was doing but primarily to offer unsolicited advice about my career choices and lifestyle decisions. "How was graduation?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "It was fine. I got my degree." "And what's next? Are you finally going to look for a real job, or are you still playing around with that computer thing?" The computer thing. If only she knew that the computer thing had generated more revenue in the past year than her pharmaceutical company's entire regional division. "I'm going to keep working on the business for now," I said. "Emma, sweetie, I say this because I love you. It's time to be realistic. You've been working on this startup for 4 years and you're still living in that tiny apartment, driving that old car, wearing the same clothes from college. Meanwhile, Daniel just bought a second house as an investment property, and I'm looking at vacation homes in Florida. I'm happy for both of you," I said, meaning it genuinely. "But don't you want those things too? Security, stability, a real income? I could probably get you an interview with my company. The pay isn't amazing to start, but it's steady work with benefits and you could build from there." Lisa's offer was genuine and came from a place of love, which made it both touching and frustrating. She was willing to use her professional connections to help her struggling sister, not knowing that I was already operating at a level far beyond anything her company could offer. "I appreciate that," I said. "But I think I'm going to stick with what I'm doing." "Your choice, but just remember, you can't live on hope forever. At some point you need to face reality." After ending the call, I drove to Quantum Solutions' actual headquarters, a nondescript building in Mountain View that housed our primary development teams and client services operations. The space looked like any other Silicon Valley office complex from the outside, but inside, it was a hub of innovation that was reshaping the technological landscape. "Morning, Emma," said Sarah Martinez, our head of business development, as I walked through the main workspace. "The government contract renewals came through, $340 million over 3 years. And the European expansion is ahead of schedule." I nodded, reviewing the weekend's progress reports on my tablet. Our AI platform was now processing data for 12 different government agencies, 47 major corporations, and over 300 smaller businesses. The technology we developed was becoming infrastructure-level critical for organizations that depended on complex data analysis and predictive modeling. "Any word from Forbes about the publication timeline?" I asked. "They're planning to release the digital version Monday morning, with the print edition hitting newsstands Wednesday. Their PR team thinks it could be one of their most shared articles of the year, given the mystery around Quantum Solutions' leadership." Monday morning came faster than I'd expected. I was in the office early, reviewing quarterly projections with our financial team, when Sarah burst into the conference room with her laptop. "It's live," she said, turning the screen toward me. There was my face on Forbes.com, above a headline that read, "The 29-year-old CEO who built a $4.2 billion AI empire in secret." The article detailed Quantum Solutions' achievements, my background, and our company's revolutionary impact on artificial intelligence applications across multiple industries. Within an hour, the story had been shared thousands of times across social media. Tech blogs picked up the coverage, adding their own analysis of how a company could grow to multi-billion-dollar valuations while remaining virtually unknown to the general public. Business news networks began calling for interviews. My phone started ringing at 10:47 a.m. The first call was from Mom. "Emma." Her voice was confused, almost questioning, as if she wasn't sure she dialed the right number. "I just saw. Someone sent me a link to an article. It says you're the CEO of a billion-dollar company?" "That's correct," I said calmly. "But how is that possible? You're living in that tiny apartment, driving that old car. We thought your business was failing." "My business has been quite successful. I just maintained a modest lifestyle while focusing on growth and development." There was a long pause. "Emma, this article says your company is worth over $4 billion. The current valuation is $4.2 billion, yes." Another pause, longer this time. "Why didn't you tell us? You never asked what I was actually building. You assumed it was failing and focused on trying to convince me to give up and find a real job." Before Mom could respond, my call waiting beeped. It was Daniel. "I need to take this," I told Mom. "We'll talk soon." "Emma." Daniel's voice was excited and slightly panicked. "What the hell is going on?" Lisa just called me screaming about some Forbes article that says you're running a billion-dollar tech company. I am running a billion-dollar tech company, I said. But you're always talking about being busy with your startup and we thought, I mean you live like you don't have any money. I live modestly because I've been reinvesting everything back into the business. It's allowed us to grow without external investors or debt financing. Emma, this is insane. The article says you have over 300 employees and contracts with the government. How did we not know about this? Because you never asked for details about what I was actually doing. You saw my lifestyle and assumed it reflected my business success, rather than my strategic choices. Over the next 3 hours I received calls from every member of my extended family. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly interested in my work. Aunts and uncles who had dismissed my career choices were calling to congratulate me on my sudden success. But the most difficult call came from Dad. Emma, I owe you an apology, he said, his voice heavy with regret. We missed your graduation because we thought it was a waste of time. We've been treating you like you were failing when you were building something incredible. I understand why you made those assumptions, I said. My lifestyle choices were deliberately misleading. But why? Why let us worry about you, offer you money, try to convince you to change careers? Why let us think you needed our help when you were already more successful than any of us? It was a fair question, one I'd been anticipating since agreeing to the Forbes feature. Because your assumptions protected me, I said. The AI industry is incredibly competitive and sometimes dangerous. Companies and governments spend billions trying to acquire or steal breakthrough technologies. By appearing to be a struggling entrepreneur, I could develop our platform without attracting the wrong kind of attention. So our lack of faith in you was actually helpful? In a way, yes. Your belief that I was failing meant you never looked closely enough to accidentally compromise what I was building. Dad was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how to process this. My daughter is one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country, and I spent 4 years trying to talk her out of pursuing her dreams. You were trying to protect me from what you saw as inevitable disappointment. Your intentions came from love. But our execution was terrible. That evening, I agreed to meet my family for dinner at the same restaurant where we'd held our last family gathering 6 months earlier. The occasion when Dad had presented me with job listings for administrative positions and Mom had suggested I consider community college courses in practical skills like bookkeeping or medical billing. The atmosphere was dramatically different this time. Dad stood when I arrived, something he'd never done before. Mom hugged me like she was seeing me for the first time. Daniel and Lisa looked at me with a mixture of awe and confusion, as if trying to reconcile the sister they thought they knew with the person described in the Forbes article. I still can't believe this, Lisa said as we sat down. Emma, the article says your company processes data for government agencies and major corporations around the world. That's correct. And that you have patents on artificial intelligence technologies that are revolutionizing multiple industries. Also correct. Daniel shook his head slowly. I keep thinking about all the times I offered to give you a job at one of my shops. I was trying to help my little sister who I thought was struggling, and you were running a company worth more than everything our entire family has ever earned combined. Your offers came from kindness, I said. I appreciated them even when I couldn't accept them. Mom was staring at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Emma, if your company is worth billions of dollars, why are you still living in that tiny apartment? Why drive that old car? Why live like someone who doesn't have money? I finished. Because maintaining that appearance has been strategically valuable. And because I believe in living below my means regardless of income level. But don't you want nice things? A big house, luxury cars, vacations. I want security, freedom, and the ability to build something meaningful. Those things don't require expensive displays of wealth. Dad leaned forward. Emma, I need to ask you something directly. When we didn't come to your graduation, when we said we were too busy with real priorities, how did that make you feel? I considered the question carefully. It hurt, I said honestly. But it also confirmed something I'd suspected for a long time. That you were more invested in the version of me that existed in your minds than in discovering who I actually was. The table fell silent. We failed you, Mom said quietly. We were so focused on what we thought you should be doing that we never bothered to understand what you were actually accomplishing. You weren't trying to fail me, I said. You were trying to protect me based on incomplete information. Lisa looked up from her phone, where she'd been reading more articles about quantum solutions. "Emma, it says here that you're being compared to the founders of major tech companies. That your AI platform could transform entire industries. That's the goal. And you built this while we were telling you to get a real job. I built this while you were encouraging me to find stability and security. In your minds, you were giving good advice." Daniel laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Good advice. We were giving career advice to someone who had already built one of the most successful tech companies in the world. Over the next 2 hours, we had the most honest conversation our family had experienced in years. I explained the technical aspects of what quantum solutions did, the strategic decisions that had driven our growth, and the reasons I'd maintained anonymity for so long. My family, in turn, acknowledged how their assumptions had prevented them from seeing what was actually happening in my life. They apologized for missing graduation, for dismissing my work, for treating me like a failure when I was building something extraordinary. "What happens now?" Dad asked as we prepared to leave. "Does this change everything?" "It changes some things," I said. "The Forbes article means quantum solutions will get more attention, which brings both opportunities and challenges. But fundamentally, we'll keep doing what we've been doing, building technology that solves real problems for real people." "And what about us?" Mom asked. "What about our relationship?" "That depends on whether you're interested in knowing who I actually am rather than who you think I should be." 3 months later, my family was in the audience for my keynote speech at the Global Technology Summit in San Francisco. I looked out at the crowd of industry leaders, investors, and entrepreneurs, then found my parents' faces in the third row. They'd done their homework this time. Dad had spent weeks reading about artificial intelligence and machine learning so he could better understand my work. Mom had researched the tech industry to learn about the challenges and opportunities facing companies like mine. Daniel and Lisa had both visited our headquarters and met key members of our team. For the first time in my adult life, my family was genuinely interested in what I was actually doing, rather than what they thought I should be doing. 18 months ago, I told the audience, most people didn't know quantum solutions existed. Today, our AI platform processes critical data for organizations around the world, helping them make better decisions and solve complex problems. I paused, looking at my family again. But the most important lesson I've learned isn't about technology or business strategy. It's about the difference between being seen and being understood. Success isn't just about building something valuable. It's about having people in your life who are willing to look beyond their assumptions to discover who you really are. After the speech, my family joined me backstage. Dad shook my hand with the respect he'd show to any other successful entrepreneur, but then pulled me into a hug with the love reserved for his daughter. "I'm proud of what you've built," he said. "But more than that, I'm sorry it took us so long to really see you." "You're seeing me now," I replied. "That's what matters." Mom smiled, tears in her eyes. "Next time you have an important event, we'll be there. Front row, cheering loudly and actually understanding what we're celebrating." My family had spent years telling me what my future should look like, never bothering to discover what I was actually building in the present. Now they knew the difference between assumptions and reality. And so did I. The funeral parlor fell into complete silence except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. My stepmother Diana's face went from triumphant to confused in the span of 3 seconds as she processed what I'd just said. My half-brothers Kevin and Tyler stopped their smirking immediately, their expressions shifting to something between panic and disbelief. "That's impossible," Diana said, her voice cracking slightly. "I have the will right here. Harold left everything to his real family." I opened my leather briefcase calmly and pulled out a thick folder of legal documents. The morning sun streaming through the funeral home's stained glass windows caught the gold-embossed letterhead of Morrison, Blackwell and Associates, the most prestigious estate planning firm in the city, and certainly not the discount legal service Diana had used. "This is the actual will," I said, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of the day. "Executed 3 years ago, properly witnessed and filed with the probate court. The document you're holding is from 2019. This supersedes it completely. My father Harold Bennett had died of a massive heart attack 5 days earlier at the age of 62. The funeral had been a tense affair from the moment I'd walked through the doors. Diana had made it clear that I wasn't welcome, despite being Harold's only biological child from his first marriage. She'd even seated me in the back row behind people I'd never met, while she and her sons occupied the front row like grieving royalty. The irony was that I'd been the one paying for his medical care for the past 2 years. Diana snatched the documents from my hands with shaking fingers, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the paper. Her face grew paler as she read, and I could see the exact moment she realized what she was looking at. Kevin and Tyler crowded behind her, reading over her shoulders. "This can't be legal," Kevin said, his voice rising. "Dad wouldn't have done this without telling us." "He did tell you," I replied. "He told you every time you demanded money from him. Every time you maxed out the credit cards he co-signed for you. Every time you moved back home because you couldn't pay your own rent." The truth was that my relationship with my father had been complicated for years. After my mother died when I was 16, he'd remarried Diana within 8 months. She came with 2 sons from her previous marriage, and suddenly I'd gone from being Harold's only child to being the outsider in my own family. Diana had made it clear from day one that she viewed me as competition for Harold's attention and resources. She'd convinced him to stop paying for my college tuition halfway through my sophomore year, claiming that her boys needed the money for their own education. I'd worked 3 jobs to finish my degree while Kevin and Tyler got full rides to mediocre state schools they eventually dropped out of. Sarah, my father's longtime attorney Margaret Collins, approached our small group. She was a woman in her 70s with steel gray hair and the kind of presence that made opposing lawyers nervous. "I'm sorry for your loss. Harold was a good man who made some difficult decisions in his final years." Diana spun around to face Margaret like a cornered animal. "This is all fake. Sarah forged these documents." Margaret raised an eyebrow with the kind of cool professionalism that came from 40 years of dealing with family drama. "Mrs. Bennett, I personally drafted these documents at Harold's request. He came to my office every month for 3 years to make adjustments and additions. He was very specific about his intentions." "But why?" Tyler asked, his voice breaking slightly. "Why would Dad cut us out completely?" I looked at my half-brothers, 25 and 27 years old respectively, both still living at home, both unable to hold down steady jobs for more than a few months at a time. Kevin had been arrested twice for DUI in the past year. Tyler had dropped out of 3 different colleges and currently spent his days playing video games in the basement. "He didn't cut you out because he didn't love you," I said quietly. "He cut you out because enabling you was killing him. Literally." The stress of supporting 3 adults who refused to support themselves had been taking a toll on Harold's health for years. Every phone call was about money, rent payments, car repairs, legal fees, credit card debt. He developed high blood pressure and insomnia from the constant financial pressure. Margaret opened her own briefcase and pulled out additional documents. Harold left detailed letters explaining his decisions. "Would you like me to read them?" "Yes," I said before Diana could object. Margaret put on her reading glasses and unfolded a handwritten letter. "This is addressed to Diana, Kevin, and Tyler, dated 18 months ago." She cleared her throat and began reading in Harold's familiar handwriting. "By the time you read this, I'll be gone, and you'll probably be angry about my final decisions regarding my estate. I want you to understand that this wasn't about punishment. It was about love. Real love sometimes means making hard choices. Diana, when we married, I thought I was gaining a family. Instead, I gained 3 additional dependents who never learned to stand on their own. I enabled this behavior and I take responsibility for that mistake. Sarah, on the other hand, has built a successful career in biotechnology and has been secretly helping pay my medical bills for 2 years without asking for anything in return. Kevin and Tyler, you are my stepsons and I love you, but I've done you no favors by constantly bailing you out of every bad decision. Sarah offered multiple times to help you both find jobs in her industry, to pay for career training, to help you build real futures. You laughed at her and called her a sellout for working in corporate America. Sarah has earned what I'm leaving her. You have not." The funeral parlor was so quiet I could hear Diana's labored breathing. Tyler was staring at the floor, while Kevin's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. Margaret continued reading. "The house on Maple Street, all bank accounts, the investment portfolio and my life insurance policy all go to Sarah. She understands the value of money because she's earned every dollar she's ever made." "How much?" Diana asked hoarsely. Margaret consulted another document. "The estate is valued at approximately $2.8 million. The house is worth $800,000. The investment accounts total $1.4 million. And the life insurance policy is $600,000. The numbers hit Diana like physical blows. She'd been counting on that money to maintain her lifestyle, to continue supporting her unemployed sons, to avoid ever having to get a job herself. At 52, she'd never worked a day in her life, moving from her parents' support to her first husband's support to Harold's support seamlessly. "This is ridiculous," Kevin said, his voice getting louder. "Sarah doesn't need the money. She's got her fancy job and her downtown condo. We're the ones who need help." "No," I said firmly. "You're the ones who need to learn independence. There's a difference." The truth was that my fancy job had been built through years of grueling work. I'd started as a lab technician at Meridian Pharmaceuticals straight out of college, working 60-hour weeks while taking graduate courses at night. I'd earned my master's degree in biochemistry while working full-time, then spent 3 years developing new drug delivery systems that had generated over $400 million in revenue for the company. I was now the director of research development with a team of 30 scientists working under me. My current project involved developing targeted cancer therapies that could revolutionize treatment for pancreatic cancer, the same disease that had killed my mother. "Sarah has been supporting herself since she was 18, Margaret continued, looking at another letter. "Harold was very proud of her accomplishments. He wrote here, Sarah turned down 3 job offers from pharmaceutical giants to stay in the city and be close to me during my illness. She could be making twice her current salary in Boston or San Francisco, but she chose family loyalty over career advancement." That was something Diana and her sons had never known. I'd received offers from Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Genentech over the past 2 years. Each offer had included substantial signing bonuses and salary increases that would have set me up for life. But I turned them all down because Harold was sick and I wanted to be nearby. Diana had spent those same 2 years complaining that Harold wasn't giving her enough money for her weekly spa treatments and shopping trips. "There's more," Margaret said, unfolding another document. "Harold also left instructions regarding the family business." My stomach dropped. I'd forgotten about Bennett and Associates, the small accounting firm Harold had built over 30 years. It wasn't worth much, maybe $200,000 in assets, but it had been his pride and joy. "The business goes to Sarah as well," Margaret read, with a note that says, "Sarah understands the value of building something lasting. Perhaps she can turn it into something meaningful, or perhaps she'll sell it and use the money wisely. Either way, I trust her judgment." Kevin exploded. "This is bullshit. We worked at that office. We helped Dad build that business." "You worked there for 6 months, I said calmly. "You embezzled $15,000 from client accounts and Dad had to quietly pay it back to avoid criminal charges." The color drained from Kevin's face. That particular family secret had been carefully hidden from Diana, who still believed Kevin had moved on to better opportunities when he'd left the accounting firm. Tyler tried a different approach. "Sarah, come on. We're family. You can't just take everything and leave us with nothing." "I'm not taking anything," I replied. "Dad gave this to me because he trusted me to use it responsibly. And he was right to do so." The truth was, I didn't actually need Harold's money. My salary at Meridian was $240,000 annually, plus bonuses that often exceeded my base pay. I owned my downtown condo outright and had substantial savings and investments. But Harold's bequest wasn't really about the money. It was about vindication, recognition, and final proof that he'd understood who had truly been there for him. Margaret handed me another envelope. "This one is personal, just for you." I opened it with trembling fingers and found Harold's familiar handwriting. "Sarah, my dear daughter. If you're reading this, then I'm gone and you're probably dealing with Diana's dramatics. I'm sorry you have to handle this alone, but I know you're strong enough. I want you to know that I was prouder of you than I ever properly expressed. Watching you build your career, seeing you persevere through every obstacle Diana put in your path, knowing you sacrificed lucrative opportunities to stay near me during my illness. You became the person your mother and I always hoped you would be. Use this inheritance however you see fit. Invest it, donate it, buy yourself something nice, I don't care. You've earned the right to make those decisions. You've proven yourself 1,000 times over. I love you and I'm sorry it took me so long to show it properly. Dad." I had to stop reading because my vision was blurring with tears. This letter was worth more than all the money combined. After years of feeling like an outsider in my own family, Harold had finally made it clear where I stood in his heart. Diana was staring at me with something approaching hatred. You manipulated him. You turned him against his own family. No, Margaret interjected firmly. Harold made these decisions over the course of 3 years, with extensive counseling from me about the implications. He changed his mind several times, always giving Diana and the boys more chances to prove themselves. Each time they disappointed him. What kind of chances? Tyler asked desperately. Margaret consulted her notes. Harold offered to pay for vocational training for both of you. Plumbing, electrical work, HVAC certification, computer programming courses. You both refused, saying that kind of work was beneath you. He offered to help you start a small business if you could present a viable business plan. You never did. He offered to pay rent on apartments for both of you if you could hold steady jobs for 6 months. You both quit your jobs within weeks. I remembered those conversations. Harold had been so hopeful each time he'd presented these opportunities to Kevin and Tyler. He genuinely wanted them to succeed, to become independent, productive adults. Their casual dismissal of his help had broken his heart repeatedly. Sarah, on the other hand, Margaret continued, never asked Harold for anything. She paid her own way through graduate school, bought her own car, saved for her own home down payment. When Harold was diagnosed with heart disease, she immediately set up a trust fund to cover his medical expenses that weren't covered by insurance. Diana's face twisted with surprise. What trust fund? The one that paid for Harold's cardiac catheterization, his medication, his dietary consultations, and his physical therapy, Margaret explained. Sarah contributed $85,000 to Harold's medical care over 2 years. She never told him where the money came from. She let him think his insurance was better than it actually was. This was news to Diana and her sons, who had never bothered to learn the details of Harold's medical situation. They'd known he was sick, but they'd assumed his insurance and retirement savings were covering everything. Why didn't Dad tell us Sarah was helping? Tyler asked quietly. Because she asked him not to, Margaret replied. She didn't want recognition or gratitude. She just wanted to make sure he got the best possible care. I looked at my half-brothers, both now staring at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Was it respect? Resentment? Probably all three. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out a folder I'd prepared that morning. Harold's will includes a provision for both of you, but it's conditional. Diana perked up immediately. What kind of provision? He set aside $50,000 for each of you, I explained. But you only get it if you complete a 2-year program, either college, trade school, or professional certification, and maintain steady employment for 1 full year after graduation. Kevin scoffed. $50,000? That's nothing compared to what you're getting. It's a start, I said. It's enough to change your lives if you actually commit to changing them. Tyler looked thoughtful for the first time all day. What happens if we don't meet the conditions? The money goes to the American Cancer Society, Margaret answered. Harold specified that organization because of your mother's death. That detail hit me right in the chest. Even in death, Harold was thinking about my mother, honoring her memory by fighting the disease that had taken her from us. Diana was studying the legal documents again, probably looking for loopholes or grounds to contest the will. This can't be legitimate. I'm going to fight this in court. That's your right, Margaret said coolly. But I should warn you that contesting this will could be expensive and ultimately futile. Harold documented his decision-making process extensively. He even had psychological evaluations done to prove he was of sound mind. The will is ironclad. I closed my briefcase and stood up, suddenly exhausted by the entire confrontation. Diana, if you want to waste money on lawyers, that's your choice. But the probate process is going to take months regardless. Maybe you should use that time to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your life. What's that supposed to mean? She snapped. It means you're 52 years old and you've never supported yourself, I said bluntly. Harold's gone. His insurance is gone. His income is gone. You need to learn how to take care of yourself. The reality was even harsher than I was stating. Diana had no job experience, no professional skills, and no savings of her own. She'd been living as a dependent her entire adult life, and now she was facing the prospect of actual independence for the first time. I could get a job, she said defensively. Doing what? I asked not unkindly. You need training, education, something marketable. The conditional inheritance applies to you too if you want it. Margaret nodded. Harold set aside an additional $30,000 for Diana if she completes a professional certification program and maintains employment for 1 year. Diana's pride warred with her practical need for money. I could see the internal struggle playing out across her face. Think about it, I said, gathering my things. All of you. Harold wanted you to succeed, but he wanted you to earn it. The opportunity is still there if you want to take it. I headed toward the funeral home exit, eager to escape the tension and process everything that had happened. Margaret walked with me, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Sarah, she said quietly, Harold would be proud of how you handled that. It can't have been easy. It wasn't, I admitted. But it needed to be done. What will you do with the inheritance? I'd been thinking about that question for months, ever since Harold had first told me about his will changes. Some of it will go into a scholarship fund for students studying biochemistry. Some will go to cancer research. And I think I'll use the house as a group home for kids aging out of foster care. Margaret smiled. Harold would love that. He always said you had the biggest heart of anyone he knew. As I walked to my car, I could hear Diana and her sons arguing loudly in the funeral parlor behind me. They were probably debating whether to contest the will, how to survive financially, and whose fault their current situation really was. I felt sorry for them genuinely. They'd had years to build relationships with Harold based on love and mutual respect rather than financial dependence. They'd had countless opportunities to develop skills, education, and independence. They'd chosen the easy path every time, and now they were facing the consequences of those choices. But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Validation. Harold had seen through Diana's manipulation and his stepson's entitlement. He'd recognized who had truly cared for him, who had sacrificed for the family, who had built a life worth respecting. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my research team at Meridian. Final trial results are in. The new pancreatic cancer treatment is showing 85% effectiveness. We did it, Sarah. I smiled through my tears as I sat in my car outside the funeral home. Harold would never see the cancer treatment that might have saved my mother, but his support had helped make it possible. The inheritance would ensure that support continued, funding research and education for years to come. Inside the building, Diana was probably still raging about unfairness and betrayal. Kevin and Tyler were probably plotting ways to contest the will or manipulate me into sharing the money. But for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace with my family situation. Harold had made his choice and he'd chosen correctly. The people who had earned his trust would carry on his legacy. The people who had taken him for granted would finally learn what independence really meant. Some inheritances, I thought as I drove away, are about more than money. They're about recognition, validation, and the final settling of long-standing accounts. Harold had given me the greatest gift possible. The knowledge that he'd seen who I really was and he'd been proud.